All right, so welcome to another deep dive. Today we're diving into a Reddit post that kind of blew up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this woman's story about her boyfriend's uh, like behavior with food,
Yeah.
and it got like hundreds of comments. So you know it really hit a nerve with people.
Wow.
And we're going to unpack like what are the red flags, in this specific story, but then also look at this whole thing about like feeder relationships.
That's such a fascinating topic. It touches on this thing that so many people, I think, struggle with,
Yeah.
which is like recognizing when a partner's actions, even when they seem like they're being nice,
Right.
actually cross a line into like being controlling.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's gonna be interesting to dive into this.
For sure. So, just to kind of set the scene right,
Yeah.
this woman wants to try the keto diet,
Okay.
which seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But her boyfriend, who's already like doing keto, goes out and buys her cakes and burgers and all this stuff that she's specifically trying to avoid.
Huh.
And even like threatens to break up with her if she doesn't eat it.
Oh, wow. That's a huge red flag right there.
Yeah.
To me. I mean, that's like classic disregarding your partner's autonomy, right?
Right.
Putting your own desires above their their well-being. And yeah, that could be pointing to something deeper.
Yeah. And the Reddit community was like all over this. Some of the comments were really intense, like he'll kill you for his fetish.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why people would react so strongly to that. I mean,
Yeah.
the word feeder, I think, often evokes those kinds of like extreme scenarios.
All right.
But, it is important to kind of understand the nuances of what that dynamic really looks like because,
Mm.
it's not always just about someone overtly being like, oh, I love bigger bodies,
Right.
It can be much more about manipulation and, fat shaming and control that might not even be sexually motivated,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
So this woman actually edited her post
Okay.
to say that her boyfriend um, sometimes calls her fat. And she's like, I don't think he has a feeder fetish because of that.
That's really interesting because it brings up this point about how these feeder relationships they're actually much more complex than just that kind of like stereotypical image.
Yeah.
Fat shaming can absolutely be part of the dynamic. Like the abuser might get off on both the weight gain and the power that they have over their partner's self-esteem.
Oh, wow.
It's like this twisted
Yeah.
kind of control.
It's really messed up. So how do we even begin to understand like the psychology behind this kind of behavior?
Yeah.
Is it always about like a fetish or could there be like other things going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's definitely a whole spectrum, right, of controlling behaviors that we see in relationships.
Right.
And while what this boyfriend's doing, kind of aligns with some aspects of like that feeder dynamic, it's also important to think about other possibilities.
Right.
So like for instance, his behavior might be coming from a place of insecurity,
Okay.
like a fear that if she gets healthier and more attractive,
Oh.
she'll leave him, right?
Yeah.
It's a fear of what psychologists sometimes call upward mobility in relationships.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he's trying to keep her kind of
Yeah.
in a place where he feels like more
Yeah.
secure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like this form of emotional manipulation. And it often stems from a place of low self-worth.
Okay.
So instead of kind of dealing with his own insecurities, he's trying to diminish her potential,
Right.
right? As a way of calming his own anxieties.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of established that like this boyfriend's behavior is a pretty big red flag.
Yeah.
But what about some of those other comments that were saying like, oh, maybe he's just insecure, or maybe he's like living vicariously through her eating.
Right.
Like, does that change anything?
It's so tempting, right, to kind of want to rationalize or find excuses for this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
But we really need to be clear that no amount of insecurity justifies manipulation and control.
Right.
Even if those explanations have some truth to them,
Yeah.
they don't take away from the harm that's being done.
You're totally right. Like a healthy relationship should be about supporting each other's uh, goals and well-being,
I just
not undermining them out of like fear or a need to control.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
And and understanding those motivations behind controlling behavior, that's valuable.
Right.
But ultimately, the focus should be on recognizing the behavior itself
Yeah,
and its impact, right, on the person who's on the receiving end of it.
for sure.
It's about empowering people to spot those red flags and put their own well-being first, no matter what the abuser's intentions are.
That's a great point. This whole situation is such a good reminder of, uh, I think, how complex relationships can be
Absolutely.
and how easily like those unhealthy dynamics can just kind of
Totally.
creep in.
Yeah.
What what stood out to you in those Reddit responses? Like, were there any comments that you were like, "Whoa, that's really insightful," or like alarming even?
Yeah, actually there are quite a few. Yeah, there was one that said, it's not a gift if consequences arise when declining it.
Oh wow.
And I thought
Mhm.
that was so, so powerful
Yeah.
because it really gets at like the heart of the manipulation.
Right.
Like a genuine gift is freely given, right? It doesn't come with strings attached
Totally.
or like the threat of punishment.
Yeah.
And this connects to this bigger point I think about recognizing and dismantling unhealthy power dynamics in relationships.
They're sure.
It's about understanding that you have the right to make your own choices,
Yeah.
especially about your own health and well-being,
Right.
without fear of retribution or manipulation.
Yeah, and there were a lot of comments too, that were just like, straight up telling her like prioritize your health and leave this relationship,
Yeah.
regardless of how her boyfriend reacts.
Right.
One person even said he wants to control you. Let him leave. Better yet, tell him to go.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people felt very strongly that like she needs to get out of this situation.
Yeah, and that's a valid concern I think because um, it's important to acknowledge that leaving an abusive or controlling relationship can be incredibly
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
and sometimes even dangerous.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to have a support system
Yeah.
in place, right? And to have access to resources that can help people kind of navigate those tough choices and really prioritize their safety.
You mentioned that leaving an abusive relationship can be dangerous. Can you
Yeah.
like talk a little bit more about that? Like, what are
Mm.
some of the risks that are involved?
Sure. So, research actually shows that the most dangerous time for someone who's experiencing domestic violence is when they're trying to leave the relationship.
Wow.
And this is because, abusers will often escalate their controlling behaviors and the violence when
Yeah.
they feel like they're losing power or control.
Okay.
So that's why it's so, so crucial for people in these situations to have like a safety plan. Yeah.
And to seek support from trusted friends and family or professionals. There are organizations that are literally dedicated to helping people get out of those dangerous situations, right?
All right.
Providing resources and guidance to make sure that they stay safe.
Okay, that's really good to know, and it's kind of a scary thought, but it's important for people to be aware of that. Kind of switching gears a little bit, a lot of the Reddit comments were really focused on this possibility that like the boyfriend might be a feeder,
Right.
but as you were saying earlier, it's not always that black and white.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the like other possible explanations for his behavior,
Yeah.
and how can we like kind of tell the difference between them?
Yeah. So, while his actions do line up with some aspects of that feeder dynamic, it's also important to think about just that broader range of controlling behaviors that we see in relationships.
So, like, one possibility is that his actions are coming from a place of insecurity, right?
Okay.
He might be projecting his own fears onto her, like assuming that if she gets healthier, if she gets more confident, that she's not going to be interested in him anymore.
So it's almost like he's trying to hold her back to maintain that sense of control and security,
Exactly.
even if it's like at the expense of her well-being.
Exactly. And that kind of behavior, it's often rooted in a very deep fear of abandonment
Okay.
and a lack of self-worth. And so instead of dealing with those internal struggles, the person tries to control their partner's uh, actions and choices as a way of kind of managing their own anxieties.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I think it is a really good point that a lot of times this controlling behavior is more about the abuser's like own stuff
Yes,
than it is about the victim's
absolutely.
actions or choices.
It's a projection, of their own insecurities and anxieties onto their partner.
Right.
And I think it's really important to kind of understand that while empathy for the abuser's struggles is tempting, it should never come at the cost of holding them accountable
Right.
for their harmful actions.
You mentioned earlier that feeder relationships are often like more complex than the stereotype.
Yeah.
Can you like unpack that a little bit more? Like,
Right.
what are some of the less obvious signs of that dynamic, and
Yeah.
and how can we like tell the difference between that and other kinds of controlling behavior?
So, that the stereotype, right, of a feeder is often, it's someone who's expressing like very open adoration for larger bodies.
Right.
But the reality is much more nuanced, I think, and kind of disturbing, honestly.
Yeah.
So some people engage in feeder behavior as a way to exert control, right? And kind of mold their partner's body to fit their desires, regardless of whether or not they actually find that weight gain uh, aesthetically appealing or not.
So it's not necessarily about a specific like aesthetic preference,
Right.
but more about just like the power dynamic
It's
itself.
the manipulation.
Yeah.
It's the violation of autonomy,
Right.
not necessarily just the weight gain in and of itself.
Right. 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 And that control can like manifest in a lot of like subtle ways, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's not always like super
Right.
obvious. Like I mean, it could be constantly buying unhealthy food or sabotaging like diet efforts or using guilt trips or even like threats to kind of force that compliance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
in some cases it might even like go as far as like restricting access to money or
Right.
transportation, which is like really
Right.
trying to isolate someone and make them like more
Right.
dependent on them.
Totally. And it's scary because this controlling behavior, it often exists on this spectrum.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And it can be hard to spot,
Yeah.
especially in those early stages.
So like what are some red flags that our listeners should be like aware of in their own relationships?
Yeah.
Like what are some like subtle signs that things might be kind of heading in a not so good direction?
Yeah, it's so true. It can be really hard to see those early warning signs,
Well,
especially when you're, in the middle of it.
you're like too close to the painting.
Exactly, exactly. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, totally.
You know.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most important things is recognizing the difference between genuine care and disguised control.
Okay.
So ask yourself, does my partner support my own growth, my own goals, even if those things aren't exactly what they would prefer?
Right.
Do they respect my boundaries, or are they always trying to guilt me into doing what they want?
Right.
Controlling behavior often disguises itself as concern, right?
But it's really coming from this place of wanting to limit your autonomy
Right.
rather than empower you.
Okay, that's a really good point. You've explained some like potential reasons for the boyfriend's behavior,
Yeah.
but like, do you think any of those actually excuse this kind of manipulation?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think while it can be helpful to try to understand the roots of controlling behavior,
Yeah.
it's really important to remember that no amount of insecurity or jealousy or even just like personal struggles justifies
Right.
manipulating and controlling your partner.
Right.
Because those actions, they cause real harm. They erode trust, they damage the victim's self-esteem.
For sure. And I think too, like, while I understand the concern about, the feeder dynamic, I also wonder if it's maybe like a little premature to label him
Yeah.
based on this one post.
Absolutely.
Couldn't there be other things going on?
For sure. I mean, we never want to jump to conclusions based on unlimited information.
Right.
And we definitely can't diagnose anyone based on just, one Reddit post. But I do think, that the situation is such a valuable opportunity to kind of examine that wider spectrum of controlling behaviors
Right.
and their impact on relationships.
Wow.
It's a good reminder to be vigilant about recognizing red flags
Right.
and to prioritize open communication and mutual respect in our own relationships.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to like figure out the why behind someone's behavior.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what really matters is how those actions are making the other person feel.
Exactly. Exactly. And we often prioritize the words that people use, right? Especially if they're being charming or
Yeah.
manipulative, but
Yeah.
but actions always speak louder than words. Pay attention to those gut feelings.
Yeah.
Those little senses of unease.
Yeah.
Those are often warning signs that we shouldn't be ignoring.
Yeah, and it's sad to think that like this woman is trying to make a positive change for her health.
Yeah.
And she's getting like resistance from the person who should be like her biggest supporter.
And that speaks to such a crucial point, I think, about healthy relationships,
Yeah.
which is that they should be a source of support and encouragement,
Yes.
not a battleground for control and manipulation.
Right.
A loving partner wants to see you thrive,
Yeah.
not shrink yourself to fit their mold.
Totally.
It's so hard when you're in it
Yeah.
to see those things. It's like you said, like being too close to the painting.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are some things our listeners should be paying attention to in their own lives?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is recognizing the difference between genuine care and like disguise control.
Right.
So ask yourself, like, does my partner support my individual growth, my goals? Even if those goals like don't perfectly align
Not really.
with what they would want for me.
Right.
Right. Do they respect my boundaries or,
Yeah.
or do they try to guilt me into doing what they want?
Right.
Controlling behavior, it often it disguises itself as concern,
Right.
but it's really rooted in that desire to limit your autonomy,
Right.
not empower you.
So, you've laid out some like potential reasons for why this boyfriend might be behaving this way.
Yeah.
But do you think like any of those reasons actually excuse like this kind of manipulation?
No, absolutely not. I think while it can be helpful to try to understand the roots of controlling behavior,
Yeah.
it's so important to remember that no amount of insecurity
Right.
or jealousy or even like personal struggles
Yeah.
justifies manipulating and controlling a partner, because those actions, they have consequences, right?
Yeah.
Like they cause real harm. They erode trust, they damage the victim's self-esteem,
Yeah.
and they have a ripple effect.
And while I do understand the concern about the, feeder dynamic,
Yeah.
I also wonder if it's like a little premature to actually label this guy
Right.
a feeder based on this one post.
Totally.
Couldn't there be like other factors at play here that were
Yeah.
not?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we never want to jump to conclusions based on limited information.
Right.
And we definitely can't, diagnose anyone based on one Reddit post. But I do think this whole situation is such a valuable opportunity to examine that whole wider spectrum
Right.
of controlling behaviors
Well-
and how they impact relationships.
Totally.
It's just a good reminder, I think, to be vigilant about recognizing red flags and to prioritize, open communication
Yeah.
and mutual respect in our own relationships.
It's so easy to get like wrapped up in trying to figure out the why behind someone's behavior.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the thing that matters the most is how those actions are making the other person feel.
Exactly. We so often prioritize the words that people use,
Yeah.
especially if they're being charming or manipulative.
Right.
But actions speak louder than words. Pay attention to those gut feelings.
Totally.
Those little senses of unease.
Yeah.
Those are often warning signs that we shouldn't be ignoring.
Totally. And it's so sad, like, to think that this woman's, she's trying to make this positive change for her health.
Right.
And she's getting resistance
Yeah.
from the person who should be like her biggest supporter.
Right. And I think that just speaks to such a crucial point.
Yeah.
about healthy relationships,
Yeah.
which is that they should be a source of support and encouragement,
Yeah.
not a battleground for control and manipulation. Like a loving partner wants to see you thrive,
Right.
not not shrink yourself to fit their mold.
Yeah. Wow. This whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
Yeah, it's amazing how like one Reddit post can spark such like a deep
Yeah.
conversation about relationships and those often subtle ways that
Right.
control can kind of creep in.
Yeah. I hope this deep dive has given you some good insights into, recognizing those red flags, setting healthy boundaries,
Mhm.
and really just prioritizing your own well-being in relationships.
And remember, seeking help is a sign of strength,
Yes.
not weakness.
Totally.
You deserve to be in a relationship that nurtures your growth
Yeah.
and respects your autonomy.
Absolutely.
And if something feels off, trust your instincts
Yeah.
and reach out for support. You are not alone.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this with me today.
Oh, of course. It was my pleasure. Always love these conversations.
Me too. This is a good one. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and insightful. And we'll see you next time.